Emily sat rigidly on the faded antique chaise lounge in the cozy living room of her lower Manhattan apartment. The first slivers of morning sun, hesitant and pale, managed to pierce the thin cotton curtains, casting faint, shimmering streaks across her face, streaks that felt as ephemeral and fragile as shards of broken memories. Still unpackaged, her hands, gripped tightly in her lap, were visibly trembling as they held the leather-bound diary. She had found it late the previous night, tucked deep inside a hidden compartment of John's writing desk. John, her boyfriend. A turbulent sensation of burning curiosity, mixed with cold, paralyzing fear, snaked through her body, placing Emily precisely on the fault line between two incompatible realities: the mundane, familiar life she knew, and a chilling new world teeming with unknown secrets. She knew, with a sinking dread in her gut, that the mere act of opening it would detonate everything. This wasn't just another average morning. This was the boundary line, the irreversible moment between the comforting reality and the truths she had spent her entire relationship subconsciously avoiding. Emily inhaled deeply, a shaky, desperate attempt to stabilize herself, but her heart was an untamed, runaway pulse, each beat so fierce she thought she could hear it reverberating off the walls. Just one glimpse, just one time, she pleaded with herself, before slowly, reluctantly, opening the first page. Every line of script that unfolded before her eyes felt like a physical invasion, a violation that made her recoil. Secrets she had assumed were buried forever were now laid bare, stark and unavoidable, holding her in a terrified trance. Her throat instantly constricted, dry and tight, and her chest felt the sudden, acute pain of a heart being squeezed, a frightening combination of horror and an irresistible, painful need to know more. She pressed the diary down hard against her thighs, struggling to draw a steady breath, but her hands were entirely disconnected from her will, shaking uncontrollably. Emily's mind raced through John, his casual reassurances, his seemingly innocent gestures, all now illuminated by a harsh, unforgiving light, rearranging themselves into the fragmented pieces of a nightmare she hadn't signed up for. Could what she was reading be gospel truth, or was this merely a desperate fabrication of her own growing paranoia? The question sent a deep, internal shiver through her, constricting her chest. Outside the apartment walls, Manhattan had fully awakened. The insistent bleep of car horns, the hurried scrape of footsteps on the sidewalk, the distant shout of a morning deliveryman all merged into the vibrant, relentless hum of the city. But inside Emily's small living room, time had curdled and stopped. All she could hear was her own ragged breathing, the drumming of her pulse, and the suffocating feeling that everything external was receding, leaving her stranded. She turned the next page, her eyes blurring with unshed tears as she took in the unimaginable details. A deeply hidden affair, promises callously broken, profound emotions that had been meticulously suppressed for months. A heavy wave of devastation mixed with disorientation, terror, and a dull, deep ache engulfed her consciousness. Emily bowed her head, clutching the book, whispering the unspoken question: why would this happen? John, how could you conceal this from me? She pushed herself up and walked with unnatural slowness toward the window. She gazed out at the packed streets, the sharp reflection of the morning sun against the towering skyscrapers, but her own world felt hollower and darker than ever before. She registered the sound of her own feet on the wooden floor, the city traffic, the snippets of conversation all suddenly sounding distant and disconnected. Each sound underscored a profound, icy loneliness, cementing the fact that, from this very moment, there would be no simple return to the life she thought she had. A light breeze drifted through the cracked window, stirring the thin curtain and making Emily flinch. She took a deep, deliberate breath, attempting to harness the raging storm of emotions: fear, curiosity, crushing disappointment, and a sharp, acute misery. She turned back to look at the diary one last time, feeling as though the entire weight of her world was about to be dropped at her feet. And in that crucial instant, Emily realized she couldn't outrun the truth for even a second longer. Emily collapsed back onto the chaise, closing her eyes, attempting to ground herself with her breath, but her mind was fiercely dragged back into the current of memory. She revisited every joyful moment with John, every shared vow, every casual smile, every touch, all now tainted, raising the terrible, blinding question: where was the line between honesty and deception? The sheer mental chaos made her desperately want to slam the diary shut, yet the desperate need for closure kept her paralyzed. She opened the next page, trembling, her eyes stinging, finally accepting that her life was irrevocably altered. Each line was a stab wound to her conviction, each secret a foundational stone on the inevitable path Emily was now forced onto, a road fraught with pain, unforeseen consequences, and no possibility of retreat. Emily remained planted on the chaise, the diary still clutched in her hands, her eyes fixed on the bold, incriminating words now etched permanently into her mind. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a violent, irregular drum against the sudden, cold silence of the apartment. Each line she recalled felt like a fresh, icy slice deep into her core, forcing her to shut her eyes, draw a shuddering breath, and fight for a semblance of control. The memories from the night before flashed back with agonizing clarity, the sickly yellow glow of his phone screen, John's furtive, guarded posture while texting, the smiles and comments that once seemed innocuous but now appeared cloaked in layers of secrecy and calculated doubt. Emily felt utterly split, suspended between two impossible cliffs, the searing, unavoidable truth she was about to unearth, and the deep reservoir of trust and unwavering love she had once invested completely in John. She finally rose, walking slowly, deliberately across the living room. Her steps echoed softly on the worn hardwood floor, each sound magnified in the suffocating stillness of the room. A tangible, crushing weight bore down on her chest, as if the very air surrounding her had suddenly turned thick and viscous. Emily glanced out the window at the morning sun blazing off the glass facades of the skyscrapers, the frantic yellow rush of the cabs below, but everything seemed irrelevant, muted, and nonsensical. The outside world was a distant, unreachable planet. There was only her, and the damning notebook. Finally, she made the desperate decision to call him. Her fingers trembled violently on the phone screen, her pulse surging, threatening to burst. When his voice finally answered, light, casual, and utterly normal, it instantly grated on her nerves. "Hey, everything okay? You're calling kind of early. I need to talk," Emily choked out, her voice shaky but underpinned by a newfound, brittle resolve. "Right now, John, come home." There was a heavy beat of silence on the line before John replied, the lightness gone from his voice. "Okay, I'm on my way." An hour later, the sharp, decisive sound of a key in the lock announced his arrival. Emily pulled the door open, seeing John standing there. The usual easy smile was present, but his eyes were heavier. Shadowda look that betrayed he was guarding something crucial, without a single word needing to be exchanged. Emily instinctively knew this conversation would act as the final, devastating watershed of their relationship. They both settled onto the sofa. The hard morning light fell across John's face, emphasizing every contour, every flicker of expression. Emily looked directly into his eyes, searching for the confession that would address all the insidious questions that had been accumulating for months. "John, why didn't you just tell me?" she demanded, her voice wavering but firming with conviction. John remained silent for a long moment, then released a deep, defeated sigh. "Emily, I don't even know where to begin. I was terrified of hurting you." A rush of betrayal, profound pain, and sharp, icy anger flooded Emily. She took a long, stabilizing breath, fighting for composure, but her voice cracked anyway. "Then start talking. I need the truth, John. All of it." He dropped his gaze, staring at the floor, and slowly, quietly, admitted, "Emily, there are things I've kept from you. I didn't want to lose you, but I couldn't bear to cause you this kind of pain either." Emily felt her heart physically seize up. John's reluctant words, when layered over the explicit confessions in the diary, made her realize she was standing at a point of no return. She didn't know if they could ever salvage what they had, or if their entire life together was about to shatter completely in the immediate aftermath of this moment. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating, punctuated only by their staggered breathing, the frantic beat of their hearts, and the intense weight pressing down on the small living room. Emily knew that from this second forward, every decision she made, every action, would dictate the fate of their relationship. The truth, no matter how excruciating, was finally inescapable. Emily slowly reached out, her fingers tentatively brushing John's arm, desperate for some small thread of connection, but John flinched, pulling back slightly, his eyes filled with genuine regret. I only wanted you to be happy," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. A complex wave of pity and fury washed over Emily. She searched his gaze, recognizing the authentic pain and remorse there, but at the same time, the sheer magnitude of his long-term deception made immediate forgiveness seem impossible, almost insulting. She drew another long, fortifying breath, trying to bring order to the chaos, the conflicting mix of love, anger, curiosity, and fear that threatened to break her apart. Emily stood up, pacing a few steps, looking out at the endless stream of Manhattan, where people were rushing to work, where life continued its monotonous loop. while she and John were balanced on a precipice from which they could not retreat. She knew, in that instant, everything had changed. Every choice, every word spoken, every single action they took would now seal the fate of their history. Emily stood motionless, her eyes locked onto John. The air in the small living room was stretched taut as a garrote wire. Every shared breath was heavy, marking the slow, agonizing passage of time. She knew, with chilling clarity, that the moment for retreat was over. The truth was about to be fully exposed, and there was no feasible path back to the naive comfort of their old life. John looked utterly defeated, his eyes sunken, displaying a visible exhaustion and a crushing weight of regret. "Emily, I need to be completely honest with you," he confessed, letting out a ragged sigh. "There's something I've been too afraid to tell you, but now you have to know." Emily held her breath, her heart briefly seizing up, the world pausing for several terrifying seconds. "Just tell me, John," she managed, her voice barely a whisper, yet commanding. "I need the truth." John lowered his head, staring intently at his own clasped hands. I lied about my work. I wasn't just working for that small consulting firm I told you about. I've also been involved in a major, confidential project tied directly to someone from my past. I never wanted you to know because I was terrified you'd be disappointed, that you'd be hurt. But now, it's all out in the open." Emily felt a sickening lurch in her stomach. The word past was a cold spike of fear. "Someone from your past? Do you mean?" She choked, each syllable feeling like sandpaper in her throat. John ducked his head further, his voice thick with guilt. "Yes, my ex, Jessica. I ran into her a few times right before we started dating, and I lied and covered it up, trying to protect you. I genuinely love you, Em, but I also desperately needed this job. I didn't want you to see me fail. I've been sitting on this secret for so long." Emily stood paralyzed, her entire body rigid. Her heart felt like it had been physically stopped. Devastation, white-hot anger, and profound disappointment flooded her system. Every previous promise, every shared laugh, every intimate touch now felt tainted, overlaid with a suffocating shadow of deceit. She didn't know how to react. Should she scream, weep, or simply remain still and let the sheer magnitude of the betrayal settle? She pivoted sharply, taking several measured steps toward the window, her gaze fixed on the oblivious chaos outside the busy commuters, the relentless city life. "John, how could you possibly keep a secret this big from me, for this long?" Emily asked, her voice shaking but radiating an uncompromising resolve. John took a step closer to her, but Emily instinctively recoiled, taking one step back. "Emily, please. I knew you would be furious. I didn't know how to handle it. I just want you to believe that my feelings for you are absolutely real. I love you." Emily felt a surge of complex, overwhelming emotion, love, fury, profound hurt, and blinding panic. She took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to corral the inner turmoil, but her mind was a spinning cyclone. She knew they were balanced on a razor's edge. One misspoken word, one wrong move now, and everything would shatter. She slowly sank onto the chaise, lifting her hands to cover her face, allowing the silent tears to track warm paths down her cheeks. John stood helpless before her, unable to bridge the emotional canyon that had just opened between them. The apartment fell silent, broken only by their heavy, staggered breathing, the insistent beat of their pulses, and the crushing weight of the secrets that had finally seen the light. Emily slowly lifted her head, her eyes red-rimmed and fierce, looking straight into John's. "You have to make a choice. John," she commanded. "Are you going to tell me absolutely everything, right now, or are you going to keep hiding pieces? I need your answer now." John lowered his gaze one last time, then let out a resigned, final exhale. I'll tell you everything. There are no more secrets. Every detail, every single thing has to come out. Emily felt her own heart skip a beat, then rush back into a frantic, accelerating rhythm. She knew that from this very moment, the fundamental reality of their life was transformed. Their relationship, their trust, and their love all were now on trial, and she had to brace herself to face the most painful truths, regardless of what the final verdict would be. Emily stood center stage in the living room, her hands shaking, her eyes burning with a searing blend of fury and profound betrayal. Each footfall on the old hardwood floor seemed to underscore the unbearable tension saturating the air. "John, how could you possibly keep Jessica a secret from me this entire time? You knew this would crush me, and yet you did it anyway," she demanded, her voice trembling but sharp, each word driving deeper into him like a focused weapon. John hung his head low, letting out a defeated, guttural sigh, his eyes brimming with palpable remorse. Emily, I never wanted to hurt you. I genuinely thought that if you just didn't know, everything would stabilize. I was wrong. His voice broke, but his sincerity in that moment was undeniable. Radiating a raw, agonizing regret, Emily stopped pacing, pinning him with a direct, uncompromising stare. The moment stretched into an eternity. Do you not get it, John? Don't you think I deserved to know the truth? Was everything about us just a complete lie? She felt the righteous anger spreading through her body, mingled with the paralyzing realization of her deep, agonizing hurt. John vehemently shook his head, tears glistening in his eyes. No, Emily, that's not true. My feelings for you are absolutely real. I love you, I truly do, but I was scared you'd be disappointed, terrified you'd walk away. I genuinely thought I was protecting us, but I know now how badly I failed. Emily felt her heart twisting violently in her chest. John's pleading words, juxtaposed against the cold facts in the diary, confirmed that everything they had built was now dangerously unstable. Every promise, every moment of shared joy, was now irrevocably clouded by doubt and profound injury. She drew a lengthy, shaky breath, fighting for control, but her voice was still frail as she continued. Is that supposed to make it better? If your love was so real, why would you hide it? If you truly loved me, you wouldn't have made me discover all this myself, from a stolen journal. John stepped forward, reaching out to touch her, but Emily quickly flinched back, retreating a step, her eyes pooling with tears. Emily, I know I messed up. I have no idea how to make this right, how to earn back your forgiveness, he admitted, his voice ragged with helplessness. Emily bowed her head, allowing the tears to fall silently, her heart a chaotic mess. Every sweet memory, every tender vow, every smile now seemed faded, dissolved by the acid of doubt and agony. Do you think I'm going to forgive you just like that? No, John, it's not that easy, she said, her voice small but infused with fierce determination. John remained silent, his gaze heavy, absorbing the full measure of her pain. The room descended into a stifling, shared silence, punctuated only by their labored breathing, the frantic pounding of their hearts, and the suffocating density of the secret that had just been dragged into the light. Emily walked over to the window again, looking out at the vast, indifferent tapestry of Manhattan, where the rush-hour crowd was still streaming past, where life went on as usual, while she and John were standing at a fateful junction from which there was no turning back. A slight breeze stirred the curtain again, emphasizing the immense tension and the terrible isolation of the moment. She inhaled deeply, trying to steady her soul, but her heart still vibrated with powerful, fearful beats. You have to understand that every action has consequences. John and I'm not sure I can ever truly trust you again, Emily stated, her resolve hardening. John bowed his head low, sighing. I know, Emily, I know all of it. I am ready to accept any consequence. I will do whatever it takes for you to understand that I truly love you, John insisted, his voice cracking, each word a desperate attempt to fill the widening fissures in her heart. Emily turned her back toward him one last time, gazing out at the bright, moving city where life persisted, yet inside her, everything felt suspended. She realized that, from this moment on, everything was fundamentally altered, their relationship, her trust, their love, and even the way she saw herself. There was no easy path forward. The totality of the truth was exposed, and she had to face it with every ounce of courage she possessed. Emily turned back, her eyes red but steel-hard, looking straight at John. You need to grasp that every decision we make from this moment on is critical. Every word, every action, will determine our fate. John nodded, a silent, weighty acknowledgement. I understand, Emily, and I will do everything to make amends, if you give me the chance. The silence returned, thick with unspoken possibilities, only the sound of hearts, breath, and the heavy awareness of secrets revealed. Emily knew that now. They faced their greatest test, whether love could survive such a profound betrayal, or if everything they had was destined to fall apart. Emily slowly sank back onto the chaise lounge, pulling her knees tight to her chest, feeling a crushing, unbearable weight pressing down on her shoulders. Her heart pounded relentlessly, each beat urging her, demanding that she make a final, decisive move. All her emotions, the white-hot anger, the piercing pain, the devastating betrayal, and the deep, persistent love surged simultaneously, leaving her breathless and overwhelmed. John remained standing before her, utterly silent, his eyes radiating a potent mixture of guilt and helpless pleading. Emily, I know I destroyed your trust, but I love you, truly. I will do absolutely anything to make this right, he insisted, his voice trembling, every word a desperate plea for a stay of execution. Emily raised her head, locking her eyes onto his, the intensity in the room so thick it felt like it could slice through steel. Do you actually believe love fixes everything, John? Because it doesn't. Not this time. All the lies, all the secrets you wounded me so profoundly, I don't even have the vocabulary for the pain I'm in. John lowered his gaze again, his hands shaking slightly. I know, Emily, I was wrong. I can't erase the past, but I want us to still have a shot at a future. I'll dedicate myself to earning back your trust. Emily took a long, stabilizing breath, her eyes sweeping over the Manhattan skyline through the window, where the skyscrapers were beginning to reflect the late afternoon light. The city's relentless rush continued outside, but in this small, tense living room, time was suspended. She finally grasped that the decision she made right now would either save or completely terminate their relationship. She brought back every shared memory. The crisp, early morning walks in Central Park, the late-night, hand-in-hand strolls across the Brooklyn Bridge, the laughter, the promises. They surfaced vividly, yet they were all brutally overlaid with a feeling of betrayal and deep sorrow. Emily knew that if she chose to forgive, they would face an overwhelming challenge. Trust would have to be rebuilt, brick by transparent brick, and every future action would require absolute, painful clarity. She inhaled deeply, her voice frail but stealing with a resolute decision. John, I need time, not days, but real time, and not just an apology. I need to see fundamental change. I need to see that you are genuinely willing to face the complete, ugly truth, and that you will never hide another single thing from me. John nodded instantly, his eyes brimming with tears. I understand, Emily. I will do whatever it takes. I will prove to you that my love is real. There will be no more secrets. I promise you that. Emily felt a painful, confusing softness return to her heart. She knew that to take this step, she had to be incredibly brave enough to face the wreckage of the past, the persistent pain, and her own deeply conflicted feelings. She slowly stood up, looking at John, her voice softer now, yet carrying an unshakable finality. We will try, John. But it has to be completely transparent. If you deceive me again, even once, I'm walking away for good. A small, tearful smile touched John's lips. His eyes, though red-rimmed, held a desperate surge of hope. I get it, Emily. I will never hurt you like this again. I swear. It's a profound moment of silence settled over them, broken only by their quiet breathing. Emily looked out at the bustling Manhattan outside, where the first hint of sunset was beginning to paint the colossal buildings. She realized that from this moment, they were embarking on an entirely new journey, a path of healing, immense challenge, and, possibly, a chance to fall back in love under a new, clearer light. Emily sat back down, closing her eyes, attempting to calm the storm of confusion raging within her. She knew this decision was far from easy, but she had to trust in herself, in her capacity to forgive, and in their ability to reconstruct their foundation. And in that quiet, fragile moment, she felt a tiny, flickering spark of hope that love, if nurtured carefully and honestly, could still survive. Emily stood like a statue by the window, her eyes fixed on the chaotic streams of traffic on the Manhattan streets, but her entire focus was locked onto John. She could feel her own pulse synchronizing with the sound of his ragged breathing. The small apartment was steeped in silence, broken only by the insistent, metronomic tick of a clock, a stark reminder that every decision they made came with a heavy price tag. John took a reluctant step closer, his voice barely a tremor. Emily, there's one more thing. I haven't told you the whole story. I've been working with Jessica on a project that I simply couldn't reveal to you. It involves a massive, multi-million-dollar corporate contract, and I was afraid that if you knew, you would worry, you would panic, you would fear for my job security. Emily spun around to face him, her eyes wide, the initial surge of anger now mixed with a wave of cold, genuine fear. John, why didn't you just say this earlier? Why did you keep piling up these secrets? Her voice was strained, thick with suppressed tears. John bowed his head low, his voice cracking. I didn't want you to think less of me. I didn't want the burden of my stress on you. I truly love you, Emily. I genuinely thought I was protecting you, but I know I messed up. Emily took a deep, shuddering breath, her heart racing in an uncontrolled rhythm. All her emotions reached a final, painful climax. Fury, disillusionment, deep ache, yet beneath it all, the undeniable tether of love and attachment remained. She knew they were balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong word, one impulsive action right now, and the entire structure would collapse. John, I need time to think. Not today, not right now. Everything needs to be processed. Sorted out in my head, Emily said, her voice softening slightly, but holding firm to her resolve. John nodded, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. I understand. I'll wait. I'll do whatever it takes to prove you can trust me again. Emily turned back to the window, watching the late afternoon sun cast an orange fiery glow across the towering architecture. She realized that from this moment on, everything was different. Their relationship was heading into its most formidable test, the trials of trust, love, and the ultimate challenge of forgiveness. The profound silence continued. They stood there, looking at each other, no words necessary, but their eyes conveyed the complete picture. The whole truth was exposed. And now they had to grapple with the seismic consequences of the deception. Emily felt a crushing heaviness in her heart, yet a tiny, defiant flicker of hope, that if they could be strong enough, they might yet rebuild their love from the ashes of lies and secrecy. She knew that every move, every decision from this point forward, would chart their future course, and she had to be incredibly brave, not just to potentially forgive John, but to forgive herself for having trusted and loved him so completely. Emily took one last deep breath, closing her eyes, feeling the rhythm of her heart, the pulse of her breath, steeling herself for the final, brutal leg of this journey. Was their love durable enough to overcome everything, or would it be lost forever? The sunset painted Manhattan in hues of fiery gold, the warm, diffuse light pouring through the living room window. Emily stood watching the soaring skyscrapers and the unrelenting rush of the crowds below, sensing the persistent rhythm of life outside. Her heart was still heavy with the recent turmoil, but a fragile, determined light had begun to flicker within her. She had found the courage to face the truth and her own willingness to fight. She finally turned back to John, her gaze resolute yet softer than the confrontation had allowed moments before. John, I've thought this through. I know your love for me is real, but that love requires absolute transparency, absolute trust. If you are genuinely ready to confront every single truth and commit everything you have to rebuilding that trust, then we will keep trying. John stood immobilized, tears freely streaming down his face, his eyes red-rimmed but blazing with profound relief and hope. Emily, I swear to you, there will be no more secrets. I will devote my life to making you see how much I truly love you. Emily inhaled deeply, feeling the crushing pressure in her chest slowly begin to subside. She knew that forgiveness was not about erasing the past, but about granting them both a precarious opportunity for a future. She walked toward John, reaching out to take his hand. We start over, but from now on, everything is out in the open. I need you, I really need you, you have to understand the gravity of that need. John pulled her into a tight embrace, his voice thick with emotion and gratitude. I understand, Emily, and I will never let you feel this kind of pain again. That's my solemn promise. They stood together in the small living room, the golden light of the sunset illuminating their faces, creating a scene that was simultaneously tender and deeply emotional. They didn't need words. They simply felt the connection, the weight of the forgiveness offered, the enduring love, and the new, vulnerable hope that had just been ignited. Emily looked out at the busy Manhattan evening, where the commuters hurried home and life flowed relentlessly forward. Yet, now, deep in her heart, she held a fragile conviction that love, if tended with radical honesty and care, could indeed be resurrected. She offered a small, weary smile, and the last lingering tear slid down her cheek, no longer a testament to pain, but a feeling of relief, release, and hard-won peace. John held her hand tightly, and this time there were no secrets, no underlying deceptions, only genuine affection and a fierce determination to move forward together. They both knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but now, they were prepared to face it side by side. The story closed under the gentle, fading light of the Manhattan sunset, with a healing process just beginning, and a radiant, hard-earned hope that true love, fueled by enough courage and transparent trust, will always find its way back.